Just 1 week ago, Triumph best described the sentiment of the American people as news broke of the death of Osama bin Laden. Even President Obama talked about the feeling he had after confirming the death of the FBI's and arguably the world's most wanted terrorist.
It was a moment of great pride for me to see our capacity as a nation to execute something this difficult this well.
This difficult, this well. Despite the mission's success, Pakistanis have some feelings of their own, taking to the streets this weekend to denounce the United States for killing bin Laden. So as new threats of retaliation from both the Taliban and al-Qaeda arise, is it crazy to think our feelings of triumph were just a sense of false security? Joining me now, Michael Scheuer, former head of the CIA's bin Laden unit, author of Osama bin Laden. Michael, I can't think of anybody better to talk about the aftermath of the death of Osama bin Laden than you, and I thank you deeply for being here with us.
Thank you, Judge.
Are we safer now that Osama bin Laden is dead? Or stated differently, are things better or worse?
Well, I'm not sure that they're worse. I think that they are. Removing Osama bin Laden from the scene was a terrific tactical victory. It is revealing a number of things that are uncomfortable for us, but certainly getting him out of the way is important. It's always better to have a dead martyr than a live smart guy working against you, and he very clearly was involved in working against the United States. But other than that, we're still getting beat in Afghanistan. The president has just about announced the surrender. The Taliban clearly is on the offensive. Our borders are still wide open. There's nothing to stop someone coming into our country. And generally speaking, the Islamist movement is more active, more spread out, and more, unfortunately, more violent than it has been at any time in the last 15 years.
Is the government, is General Petraeus, before he leaves to run the CIA, prepared for what the Taliban will claim to be the spring offensive in Afghanistan?
Oh, the American government, the American forces probably can hold that off, Judge. I don't think that's a problem. They have superior firepower. But we're being nickeled and dimed away. We don't have enough troops to win in Afghanistan, and we don't have the political will to send enough to win. And the idea that somehow just killing Osama bin Laden removes the problem we went there to solve is a mistake. And I think, for what it's worth, I think General Petraeus managed to lose in Iraq. He's managed to lose in Afghanistan. And now they're going to put him in charge of the CIA, and he may well bring the half-baked advisors he's had on those two wars to the agency.
Oh, boy. Were you surprised that some of the things we learned about bin Laden, or I shouldn't say we learned, Michael, correct me on that, some of the things that were revealed about bin Laden since his death? Stated differently, did the CIA already know all of that?
Well, we certainly knew that he was a man who was a true modernist in the sense of the use of the tools of modernity, Judge. The films that they released over the weekend with him watching himself on the TV very much confirms what we've seen. He's always been very concerned with his presentation as a leader. In camouflage clothes when he's out in the field, in fancier robes when he is in a more studio setting. And more than that, he was always obsessed with using the correct Arabic word, the correct Arabic language, and especially grammar. And so watching himself speak is very much in character for him.
Do you think that the federal government is revealing too much about bin Laden since his death?
Well, they're absolutely revealing too much of what we did with talking about the safe house there and talking about the stealth helicopters. There was no need for anybody to talk about that. But what they're doing is, al-Qaeda is like any Western intelligence service, Judge. When we lose someone or we lose some files, we assume everything is compromised. And so we move immediately to change everything. And al-Qaeda is changing right now phone numbers and everything else. So by telling them we have all this information, we're giving them even more impetus to change everything.
What do you think we should do about Pakistan? I mean, can we trust the Pakistani governments? Are they allies? Are they enemies? We obviously need the territory there. The president didn't tell them about this mission until after it was over with. Bin Laden must have been protected by some military or some intelligence forces. This is a real conundrum. What's Scheuer's advice on this?
Fear God and take your own part, Judge. This is a war we're only going to win if we do things ourselves. The Pakistanis have the whip hand in our relationship. We cannot keep the NATO force and U.S. force in Afghanistan supplied with anything unless we have access to Karachi port and permission to truck things from Karachi to Afghanistan. So this is all hot air you're hearing from the Congress. If we step out, the Chinese and the Saudis make up the shortfall in money, and we're dead in the water without Karachi.
Scheuer, you say it like it is. Thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure, Judge. Thank you.
Just named one of the country's best companies to work for, the government's friend Fannie Mae is now looking for more of your money. My next guest says the solution is to eliminate Fannie Mae once and for all. Good idea. You don't want to miss this. As the governor of New Mexico, he lowered taxes 14 times during his 2 terms in office and still managed to balance his budgets. What would this Republican presidential candidate do to get our country's checkbook back in the black? Former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson joins us from Santa Fe. Governor, it's a pleasure. Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. I watched you.
Judge, great to be on. Thanks.
I watched you the other night at the Republican debate. Of course, I wasn't one of the moderators, but I would have said what I'm going to say now. Why do you want to be president of the United States?
Well, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I could do a really good job, and I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have the resume to suggest that that might actually be the case if I were elected. So, great opportunity with the debate the other night. I have no complaints with the debate.
What's the principal issue on which you run? Why you and not Ron Paul or not Rick Santorum, who's going to be on in a couple of minutes, not Newt Gingrich, not Herman Cain, not any of the others?
Well, I do have a history of looking at everything from a cost-benefit analysis, and in that context, I probably vetoed more bills than all the other governors in the country combined when I was governor of New Mexico. So what's the government spending its money on, and what are we getting for the money that we're spending? And we are bankrupt in this country. We're on the verge of a financial collapse.
Right.
There's no repaying $14 trillion in debt when the deficit this year is $1.65 trillion this year, last year, the year before, and years going forward. Come on, it's not going to happen. I would advocate balancing the federal budget tomorrow.
Governor Johnson, would there be any bailouts? Would there be any TARP? Would there be any stimulus money? Would there be any more borrowing under a President Johnson?
You know, what I think the Americans are sick of is the notion that the government picks winners and losers. They do that when it comes to business. They do it when it comes to banking. They do it when it comes to foreign governments. I think what needs to be provided, and what I would have done as governor of New Mexico, government can provide a level playing field that everybody has access to the American dream, going from having nothing to everything if you're willing to work hard and innovate.
Can the president leverage? He just went up in the polls a little bit. We'll put some polls up for you. Before Osama bin Laden's death, well, he gained 6 points since Osama bin Laden's death on his being president of the United States. He gained 1 point since Osama bin Laden's death on the issue of the economy. Question, Governor Johnson, can the president leverage this killing of Osama bin Laden into enough popularity to get his programs through the Congress or himself reelected?
You know, maybe he could leverage what happened with Osama bin Laden if mission accomplished, let's get out of Afghanistan. And while we're at it, let's get out of Iraq. And while we're at it, maybe Libya is not what I originally thought it was. And what's the portent? For us to get involved in 5 other countries now in the Middle East because of those of that unrest?
All right, we got about 30 seconds left. Does the argument you just made, get out of Iraq, get out of Afghanistan, get out of Libya, does that resonate in Republican primaries?
I believe that it does, and I'm trying to put a voice to that resonance. I'm trying to put a voice to the fact that we are bankrupt, and that means looking at issues and looking at doing things differently. Look, I think President Obama deserves re-election if we want more Keynesian economics, if we want a further devalued dollar, and if we want to be in these conflicts forever.
Got it. Governor Johnson, former governor, New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, thanks for joining us.
Judge, thank you.
Newt Gingrich is expected to dive into the GOP presidential waters this week as the pool just keeps getting deeper and more crowded. I'll talk to candidate Rick Santorum next. 12 race for the White House is in full swing as the Republican candidates throw their hats into the presidential election ring. Newt Gingrich is expected to be the next to announce, and we just heard from candidate, former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. Joining me now is Republican presidential candidate and former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum. Senator Santorum, welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Nice to chat with you, my friend.
Well, it's great to be with you, Judge. How you doing?
Good. Well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good.
Why do you want to be president of the United States?
Well, I don't think anyone should want to be president of the United States unless you feel like you're called to do it. And, I think we're at a very critical time in our country's history. We're at a time when we have a group of people in Washington, D.C., led by President Obama, who want to change America, the America that my grandfather came to, that was founded on this principle that limited government and the purpose of our government was to keep people free. And the president made, I think, a remarkable statement just a couple of weeks ago when he said America was not a great country. Not a great country until Medicare, Medicaid, and unemployment insurance passed in 1965.
Oh, boy.
America was founded great. People, we need a leader, someone who's been a passionate leader, who's been conservative and principled in his time in elective office, who can win in tough elections, can defeat Democratic incumbents, who can go out and articulate a vision, a very different vision than Barack Obama has for this country.
Can you keep the government within the confines of the Constitution? Could you run the government without more borrowing? Could you not borrow money and not increase the debt, unlike the president who wants to add $2.7 trillion to it?
I'm the only person that's been out there who's actually worked and led the fight, actually drafted the Contract with America bill that ended a federal entitlement, which was welfare reform, and worked in the United States Senate to pass it. Jim DeMint and I, as well as many others in previous years who went out and argued for Social Security reform, actually reducing the cost and making Social Security solvent. And I did that in a state that had the second highest per capita population of seniors in the country, and I won re-election after having advocated for that in 1997 and 98. So I mean, you have someone who's actually been out there talking about the big issues of the day and doing more than talking, right. Being someone with answers who's actually solved these problems and can solve them in the future.
We only have about half a minute. How do you feel? You feel good about this? You seem to have a lot of fire in your belly.
Yeah, look, a lot of fire in the belly because there's a lot of fire in the belly of people across America. They know what's going on in Washington. They know this is a big election. It's the most important one in our country's history to really get back to those constitutional principles. If Obamacare is implemented, I say this in every speech, then the America that my grandfather came to is gone, and we can't let that happen.
Got it. Senator Santorum, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Next,
thank you.
Tackling the economy in a big way. Does the government work for us, or do we work for the government? Can the president's newfound nerve and muscle in executing his foreign policy be translated into success with his economic policies here at home? Tonight, the power of the presidency and domestic politics. Last week, the president united the country in a manner not seen since the days immediately following 9/11. He did so, of course, with the daring raid that killed Osama bin Laden, and he extended the euphoria with the victory laps he took around the country. The calls for pictures of the dead bin Laden, the questions about the lawfulness of the raid, the criticism of the government for giving vastly different and even contradictory versions of the bin Laden killing have all died down in deference to the relief felt by all of us that bin Laden is dead. And I say this as one who has harshly criticized and seriously questions the lawfulness of this episode. It is over, and it is a relief. The president has obviously taken the pulse of the American people, and it is beating happily when monsters are killed. So happily that last week, during the celebrations over the death of bin Laden, President Obama tried to kill this man, Anwar al-Awlaki. He is a cleric living in Yemen who has apparently encouraged violence and death here in the U.S. He is also an American, born in New Mexico in 1971. The attempt to kill him marks the first known military order by an American president to kill another American, other than via the imposition of the death penalty after a trial, since the Civil War. Even FDR opted to try German saboteurs caught in Florida and New York at the height of World War II, and when he learned that one of them was an American, spared him the death penalty. President Obama clearly knows he is riding the crest of a wave of popularity now, and he knows that Americans want their enemies slain, no matter the procedure that brings about their death. One of America's enemies that the president cannot slay is our terrible economy. Not only can he not slay it, but he has actually made it far worse with his borrowing and central planning. Have you been to the dentist lately? Well, if you have, and if you want to pay your bill over the course of the next year rather than all at once, you will need the approval of federal bureaucrats, thanks to President Obama's financial regulations. So much for your freedom of choice. Have you been to your doctor lately? If you have, then you no doubt saw him or her using a laptop to record whatever you revealed and whatever the doctor diagnosed. What you should also know is that federal bureaucrats have access to all the information in that laptop, thanks to Obamacare. So much for privacy. If you've been to the gas station recently, you see a number never before seen in American history. $4 a gallon for gasoline. So much for the stimulus packages and oil drilling moratoriums. And if you watch Fox News regularly, then you know that the federal debt, the debt of the federal government, which is now at $14.3 trillion, was at $9 trillion when President Obama entered office. And he's now asking the Congress to borrow another $2.7 trillion. Earlier today, the Republican Speaker of the House said we need to let him borrow. Let him borrow? How on earth can a problem caused by too much borrowing and spending possibly be cured by more borrowing and spending? Answer: it can't. It will just delay for another day on the watch of some future president and Congress the inevitable crisis that comes when the borrower cannot pay back his loans. What shall we do? Well, we should carefully scrutinize the Republican candidates for president to be sure that they are true to small government, sound money principles and that they are faithful to the Constitution. Those three broad brush areas alone, the size of the government, borrowing and spending, adherence to the Constitution, will be the points of debate that will decide our future in the presidential election in 2012. Oh, and then there are first principles by which we live our lives, and we should insist that the government does the same. Don't spend money that you don't have. The people are entitled to a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. And anyone in the government who thinks that we can all get richer just by letting the Federal Reserve print more cash should have his head examined and then be booted from the government. Tonight on Freedom Watch on the Fox Business Network at 8 p.m., we have an ATF agent who blew the whistle on his bosses. Are you ready for this? For selling machine guns to Mexican drug gangs. From New York, defending freedom. So long, America.